Well, we want to welcome everybody to Meteor Education's Chat and Chew. And we are so excited to be able to bring these to you just to share some best practices and ideas. I am Linda Dove, and I am the Executive Director for Meteor Education. And I also wear a second hat as Chief Academic Officer for the Center for College and Career Readiness. And sorry, my phone's ringing right now in the background. We're live. But anyway, we're so glad that you guys are joining us today. With me today is Linda Gale Walker, and she's a great educator and a colleague of mine with 28 years of education background, from being a teacher to being an administrator to being at the district level. And her current role right now is an instructional designer with Meteor Education, but she also serves as an adjunct professor for the Center of College and Career Readiness. And I'm excited today, Linda Gale, because this is such a hot topic right now that we see out there.
Yes.
And the title of our Chat and Chew is Finding Moments of Peace, Letting Your Glitter Settle. And I think I need a lot of time to let my glitter settle, but we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And I kind of want to start us because this is really kind of a little bit about mindfulness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So when you're thinking about mindfulness, what exactly is that? Because I think a lot of people have different ideas of what it even means.
Yeah, well, and I completely agree with that. And I want to start kind of talking to you about what it isn't. Because in my mind, when you talk about mindfulness, it's kind of a hinky-jinky, oh, we're going to be really, but it's really not. Mindfulness, first of all, is not just about taking a breath and relaxing. Now, we all need to do that, but it's more about being aware, and it's not just a quick fix. I used to play tennis, and so, when I'd get really upset or, competitive playing tennis, I'd kind of be like, okay, take a second, take a breath. That's a part of mindfulness, but that's not all there is to it. The other thing is it doesn't always require meditation. I've had a lot of people say, I don't like to meditate. I'm going to be honest, I don't really enjoy necessarily meditation for a long time myself. I kind of struggle with that. I've gotten a little bit better, but it's something that requires kind of some skills. So it doesn't require you jump right into meditation and you're going to be, that kind of thing. The other thing it isn't is it's not mindless. Now, I love my phone. I didn't get a phone forever, but I sometimes don't mind mindless scrolling, or playing some just cheap games, or I said this is embarrassing, but if any of y'all know the Real Housewives, sometimes I'll watch that because I don't have to think about it, and my life doesn't look so much like a train wreck when I watch them. So that's a little bit better.
Pretty good then.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, we're not so bad. So it's not being mindless. It's completely different. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a minute. But and it also doesn't have to be tied to religion. Somebody said, well, isn't that the Buddhist thing? Buddhists have meditation and things, but what this mindfulness we're talking about today is really doesn't have to be necessarily tied to religion. A lot of people do meditation and prayer, things like that. And that can be tied to it. And a lot of times, just if you're a faith-based person, I am. And so it does kind of go there for me sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. And it also isn't one size fits all. So Linda, you and I have we've worked together a long time, and we have a lot of things in common. And then we have a lot of things that were different. So the way that we both might approach mindfulness might be different. And so that's kind of what it isn't. The thing that mindfulness is, I love these quotes, and I'm not going to read them to you because I know you all can read, but I love the one in the blue where it says, mindfulness is about observation without criticism, being compassionate with yourself. One of the things I kind of struggle with personally is I'm a little bit perfectionistic. I know that's hard to believe, and controlling sometimes, maybe some people might have said. I like to call that leadership, not bossiness, but whatever. But do you kind of find that too? I kind of have trouble being a little bit compassionate with myself. I mean, and I think that's a common struggle for people, and also being not critical of how you think being the only worldview. And that's something that we talk about a lot. And in this day and age of this being compassionate, that's a very, very important piece to us. So
yeah, that's kind of interesting though. The whole, we hear a lot about giving yourself and your students grace during this period.
Yes.
And compassion, and I don't think we do that enough or even think about that. So I'm just curious, when we think about mindfulness and with what you shared, and it's about being compassionate, I get that too, but what are the benefits of mindfulness?
Well, so this is really interesting to me, because I think we'll talk later on in a little bit too about things, but I don't know that I've really ever thought about that. I always thought about it, I think about being, oh, it's just going to help me relax. But really mindfulness, Harvard Business Review did a huge study on businesses, and they're starting to do this in their business world. And one of the things they found is that it can increase that focus of people. Being able to practice that mindfulness helps them be able to focus on a task better, staying calmer under stress. You and I both are administrators, and there's so many times, and even if you're at home right now with your kids, it's stressful. But I always say that when mama ain't happy, kind of nobody's happy. If you're stressed in your house, it permeates to everyone. And so that's another piece of it, that staying calm under stress. It's supposed to help with memory, better memory retention. And then also the thing I thought was interesting about the compassion is it kind of leads to your compassion with yourself, which leads you to be compassionate more with others without judgment necessarily. So that kind of helps a lot with that being just a better citizen for our world. And I think that is kind of a neat piece that not necessarily I thought of when I started this. So.
You know, it's kind of interesting you say that because I think about anxiety. You mentioned focus, which is kind of interesting to me because I think about anxiety. And when people get anxious, they lose their focus completely. So I can kind of see where mindfulness, and I know some of the practices you're going to share in a little bit, might help us being really deliberate with that. So here's a question I have, which is, this is a question I've had before about mindfulness, and I've never really gotten an answer. Is it something that you're supposed to do to create a habit? Or is it something that you just need to be aware enough to when you feel those moments of anxiety or anxiousness that you know what to do?
Well, it's so funny that you bring that up because I think when I started thinking about mindfulness before I really did any research, I was like, oh, it's just if I get stressed, I'm going to be mindful. But it's not. And that, in fact, going back to this Harvard Business Review study, they said if you would try 10 minutes of mindfulness throughout your day, 3 times a day, it would have those extended benefits of having all those things really be solidified. And just like we talked about learning, it becomes part of who you are, and then you're able to use it when you need to pull it. But by doing it 3 times a day, it really helps you kind of get those benefits listed above. And that's not very much. One of the things I kind of thought about doing is kind of starting that. I'll do this sometimes when I get stressed. And then, or in the morning, maybe I'm gonna do it in the morning and see, how am I feeling? Checking in with those things. At lunch, like if I've got a lot of things going, and then at dinner, what am I going on? And 3 times a day isn't very much, but it becomes a habit where at first it has to be really intentional, I think. Okay, I'm gonna be mindful. And I think at some point in time too, you may be mindful several times during the day and just be overall more emotionally intelligent because you've been using these strategies. That's a huge piece when you start thinking about too. Communication skills, future-based skills. Huge one is emotional intelligence, and it's hard for people. So this being mindful really does help build that as well.
So, I'm just curious because it's, we're all going through a really trying time right now. I don't care how emotionally stable you are. I think what's going on in the world right now, and the virus, and so many things that many of us have never, ever encountered here in the United States for sure, that it goes back to being compassionate about yourself that you mentioned. Are there times though, and I can see where people want to be mindful, but you also at some point kind of feel like taking that time to be compassionate for yourself might be selfish when you're responsible for your own children, or you're a teacher and you're responsible for all these little kids or students that you're working with, that you want to be there for them. So what's your feelings on that?
Well, I think that's, you really hit the nail on the head, is because I think we always do. We're like, okay, in our mind, if we were going to homeschool, it's going to be this perfect little situation. You've got your little desk here. This is all your stuff. But we're not in that. This is crisis schooling. And what we thought it might feel like, what we really feel like is, I laugh. I'm like, okay, it is Tuesday. It is what time? Because our routines are so different. So some of the things to start with is mindfulness too as we go along. Because some of you people I know on here today are teachers and moms, and they're helping with parents that may be. So everybody's got all these things that they're supposed to do. So the first thing you need to do is put that oxygen mask on first. Now, you and I are not good at this.
We're terrible
we're not.
at it.
We are terrible. We are terrible. I always say, I know the one person will answer my email at 2 o'clock in the morning. Usually it's you. joking, but kind of, you've got to put your oxygen mask on first. And it can feel selfish, but it's just like on the plane. If you're not able to help yourself, I go back to when I feel stress, even when my children were younger, when I felt stress, everybody else felt stress too. And it would be really frustrating to me because they're like, I am working so hard. And I felt like almost I was fitting things in instead of ever taking time to myself. So sometimes I wouldn't do anything for myself till I crawled in bed and was sound asleep. That just kind of wears on you. And especially with this time with so much uncertainty, I said the other day, I would be a terrible prisoner of war. I might be able to do a little jail time because I would know there was an ending. I was like, okay, I can do anything that's terrible for this long. But it's so unending, and everybody's stressed about that. So those kinds of things really help to put your oxygen mask on first. The other thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect to be good. Let go of some of those expectations. Some of us really that are a little bit maybe controlling, whatever, or perfectionistic. When our kids are doing work or we have these things, we really have a certain way in our head that things should be. And mindfulness is about that no judgment and compassion. So if you need something different than I need, just because it's not the way I think it should be, doesn't mean it's not good. And that's a big lesson to talk to our kids about too. Some of you are at home with kids. I have 2 boys and they are night and day different. I have one very perfectionistic tendencies and everything's got to be this way. And I've got other ones that's like, oh, it'll be fine. We'll just put it on whenever. So you've got to remember, you've got to find that peace. And that goes to my next spot is balancing. Balancing isn't like I've got to stand on one foot and I'm going to make dinner and I'm going to work and I'm going to teach kids and then I'm going to clean the house and it's crazy. It's even the silly things like nobody get their hair done, nobody get their nails done. There are little bitty things that are just all in your mind all the time. So balancing the time of mindfulness with just some of that good old honest communication and thinking about what do I need to do to make myself feel better. So one of the things that's funny you were saying that.
I know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you got me all excited.
Please.
So something that it's interesting you mentioned that about balancing. Doesn't mean standing on one foot, and that balance is important. And I'm going to tell a story about my mother, who probably would die if she knew I was doing that, but that's okay. My mom's a pretty balanced person. And especially through what's happened these last few weeks and months, which have been really difficult, what she has said, which is very intriguing to me, is I feel like sometimes I can't get my breath and I feel like my chest, and I've had to literally, and I don't think she realized it was mindfulness, literally walk away from the TV because she would watch the TV and get inundated with the news. And I mean, the more you watch it, just the more, unsteady you felt, that she literally would get up and go over to the sliding glass, right there, and just take a deep breath and then just blow it out 2 or 3 times. She said that tightness totally went away. And what she learned is she turned the TV off. She watches the TV first thing in the morning and in the evening, and that's it, because it was too much. And it was creating imbalance, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a difference. It's a different world. We're going to talk about, it's a different world that we're living in. And so it may be and the mindfulness piece that's so important of this right now too is saying, and it's not selfish to say, I am feeling really stressed. And instead of me just keeping on because I think dinner has to be on the table at 6:30 because that's when we've always had dinner before, it's okay. Like, it's okay for it not to be. If that's causing you stress, figure some things out. One of the things we did at our house, I have 2 college-age sons who are adults on their own back home. That's a whole different set of parameters because they're adults. But we had to talk about even like norms. What do we each need? Because you've got to think about that. And it's not fair if you also aren't all getting your needs met. And it's not teaching. So this is something else. I have boys and girls are the same way. It's not teaching them also. If you sit there and go, oh, well, I don't need anything. I never need time. I'm just going to live in this just frazzled state and I'm not going to think about anything. It doesn't show them any good skills to cope with relationships later on. By being able to use this time to navigate those waters, show balance with you, that's something I think is very, very important too.
So I'm just curious, you're talking a little bit about, different people in your household and how different people balance and everything. So I also heard about this, but I don't know. So I'm coming to the expert on it.
Right.
Is there a difference if you're an introvert versus if you're an extrovert when it comes to how you deal with mindfulness and what you do, or is there really not any difference?
So it's funny because it's hard on mindfulness isn't one size fits all, but mindfulness is good for everybody. So
Okay.
it's really interesting. If you're an introvert, you've got 6 or 7 hours of Zoom calls a day, and you have no downtime. Like you have no time to say, I'm going to sit on the porch and drink coffee by myself and or reflect or I mean, whatever you need to do to have that time of reflection as an introvert and kind of just away from the frazzled fray, you've got to take that. Whereas your spouse may be an extrovert. So I'm going to guess at your house, would you say your husband is an extrovert?
I am the introvert, 100%.
So so it's funny because so at our house it's a little bit different. I am an extrovert, but I feel like I kind of have a little bit of an extrovert introvert too. But it's funny, I've got a child who he wants to be with you all the time. He's very extroverted. So it's like, hey, let's do this. I mean, and sometimes it's not bad to say, hey, I need a minute. Let's do this in 30 minutes. You go do this for 30 minutes. Let me do this for 30 minutes. Extroverts too, though, if you're an introvert, remember, it's going back about not being judgmental and being compassionate. Right. So what we've kind of done in our household, it goes back a little bit to the balance piece of, all right, I'll go outside and play around the world basketball for 30 minutes, but we're also going to have 30, say at 9:30, everybody goes to their corners and has some downtime. You've got to build in those people, think about those people, think about your kids too. In your house, could you create a cave space even for an introverted kid, where even though if your house wasn't very big, is there a way they could even put a blanket over a chair and sit there where they have a little space of their own? So it goes back to being very sensitive about being the differences in people, but also what that looks like individually.
So can you share with us, I'm just curious at this point, just give us 2 or 3 ideas of maybe some practices that we can use at home, but if I'm a teacher, I might be able to also use that a little bit too.
With them? Yes.
Yeah, with kids.
Yes. Well, let me show you. Let me show you too, real quick. This piece too.
Oh,
I just
yeah,
want to.
okay.
I want to. Well, and I'm gonna do that. But this is something I want people to think about going back to introvert, extrovert.
Yeah.
We also sometimes have optimists, pessimists, and realists. So if you're really optimistic, sometimes people I will be honest, positivity is one of my first core clarity things. So to me, when this all started, it's like, it's going to be 3 weeks. It's going to be great. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to clean out all these closets. I'm going to learn a little language. All these things are free. I'm going to go and research. Well, raise your hand. Y'all can raise your hands. Show me. How many of y'all had those great intentions? Did you have some of those great intentions as well, Linda? To do some things?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And honestly, this is terrible. I can tell you about Tiger King and Carol Baskin now. My kids and I watched it. It was not a bad, weird bonding experience, kind of. But I'm just saying it's okay to not do that. But sometimes us optimists are really like, oh, this is going to be fine. And then I don't think anybody's ever like, hey, I'm just a really big pessimist. But sometimes we say that a realist. But being positive is also being real. It's okay to validate your feelings. That's mindfulness. It doesn't mean you're going to wallow in them, but it's just being aware of, hey, this is a kind of a hard time for all of us. So that kind of helps you a little bit too when you start thinking about what kind of these mindfulness exercises and activities could you do. And so let's go to that really quick if that's okay. And yeah, Sebastian, our producer Sebastian, I'm going to call him Hellman from Philly, and what is it now? I don't know who she's with, but anyway, Sebastian will put in the chat some links. There are tons of mindfulness activities on the internet. So we're going to have some on there for us to share. I like positive psychology. I don't think they're hard, but one of the ones that I started out with kind of practicing this is, again, I live with boys that are older in college. And so when I talk about mindfulness, they're like, she's at it again. So one of the things we started out, it's a real easy beginning one, is, I don't know if y'all ever watched Jimmy Fallon, but he'll put something in a box and nobody else can see. And you have to describe everything about the thing in the box for other people to guess. So instead of telling the boys, hey, we're going to do mindfulness, I said, for getting something, you have to go over and I want you to answer these questions. So you can do this at your house with any type of food or anything you want to. But I gave mine different kinds so they would be able to describe them differently. But like a raisin, you would look at a raisin and you would just spend several minutes looking at it, say, how does it look? And how would I describe that? How does it feel? How does its skin respond to my texture? How does it taste? How does it smell? All those things. And that just takes your mind straight from your mind. So as you're starting mindfulness, if you have trouble with your mind wandering, which many of us do, that's a very good activity. It's short, but you start to increase the length of things like that. So it's the raisin activity. If you haven't done any of this with your kids, is a great way to do it. And then what we did is I did it right before dinner. And then I'm like, okay, so everybody described their thing. And we all had a conversation about what we thought it was and that kind of stuff. So another thing we're building there with kids is communication skills. The other thing I love to do, I am a sire. Like, I didn't know I was a sire. My mom, I hope my mom's not listening either.
You're a sire? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, she'll go.
Oh. I do that too.
So I don't like to say, I'm really irritated about this, but I'll go. So I started this deal called dragon breathing, and y'all at home do this with me. But what you do is you raise your arms up, take a deep breath in, and you're going to go down to your side, blow it out slowly, and then you make dragon wings. Okay, and you blow in and you go, and you make like a dragon wing. I hope you can see me here, and then you blow it out. So we do dragon breathing with our kids. So if you're at home with little kids that are kind of getting rambunctious, dragon breathing is a great way to kind of slow them down, stop. We also do it with feelings. Like sometimes we'll say things like, hey, how are you? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling anxious? And so one of the things we did the other day is, with my niece and nephew, we're feeling sad. So we did the sad dragon breathing. So when we did our breathing, we were like, oh, and everybody kind of talks about those feelings and those feelings being okay. So that was another big piece of it. And then I also do something called stop, which is really helped me with sometimes in the middle of cooking and I'm busy and I'm hurried and I'm trying to talk to my son and he's not listening, I'm not listening, and it just gets to be a really big mess. I use this practice called stop, which is stop what you're doing and whatever you're doing, put it down for a second, take a few deep breaths and observe, and then proceed with something that helps you deal with that. So whether that's, just saying we're coming back in 30 minutes or really do I need to talk about this right now or should I call a friend? Any of those things can help us too. And that goes right along with letting your glitter settle. So I made my own little glitter jar here. But if you think about glitter jars, you can make these with kids. There are some websites. In fact, one of the ones I found is you get a little liquid glycerin, it makes them go longer. But make yourself just a little glitter jar. And so what you do when you're upset, you think about your mind as being shaken because all these things are in your head. One of my very creative friends actually with her kids made these and she did different colored glitters for the things that were stressing them out. But before you respond or you think, you let your glitter settle because you can't, even though I can still see through my glitter when it's rolling, it's not something I can see clearly. And then time is on your side. I don't ever know anybody that has said, oh, you know what, I rushed into that. It was just the best thing. Most of the time when we rush to speak first, before we've had time to think about it, it gets us in trouble, especially when things are a little bit stressful. And I always say this, and I've said this to my children forever. Before you respond, once your glitter settles, think about, is it more important to be right or have the relationship? So what's most important to you? And again, it's not always perfect, but there is always an example. So even if I am very stressed and my kid, I'm like, hey, we're going to do a mindfulness activity together. Your kids may kind of groan and go, oh, mom, whatever. The thing is, too, with all of the rate of stress and mental illness we're seeing with people, we live in such a different world that one of the things that I see so often and so much is people are just so busy and hurried that by taking that time to let our glitter settle, it's almost like we've learned from the past to impact the present. So I hope on the very beginning they saw the little lady saying this was Snapchat for old folks. But Linda, like you, do you feel, were there some things you did with I always think in my life I felt the calmest times. I was thinking about that the other day. And my grandparents lived through the Depression. They lived through some really terrible things that happened. My grandmother was orphaned really early, young. And I go back to so many times that I saw her do things. She had this crazy paint by number set. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm an overachiever. I'm like, if you love to paint, take lessons and we'll get this. And she's like, no, I just want to take the color and put it in the right color on the dot. And it's about being mindful and thinking about being present in that moment. So do you have some things like that too as well that you've kind of seen?
Oh, I think so. It's interesting because I kind of reflect a lot back on with my grandparents. It almost seems like it was a simpler time, and probably it wasn't simple. They went through, horrible things too, but it's just that idea. Because we always had dinner with them. We always sat around and talked or played kickball, or we were just in that moment. And it wasn't the busyness that I think sometimes we get sucked into today.
Well, and as we kind of get ready to wrap this up, that's one of the things that I thought too for parents at home and taking heart in that. as hard as it is and as worried as everybody is, those kickball games are important. Round the world basketball is important. And also reflecting on that. Mindfulness doesn't mean you just sit and you're meditating. It can be, you can do a mindful activity. One of the things I read many years ago with boys is boys talk to you more if they're doing something with their hands. So think about those things and really use some of these times. Go back to what you ask your kids. What do you really love about being home right now? Like, what's something really good that you like? And capitalize on those things. So, you know, I think you'll be surprised. But I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for having me come in and talk about all of this.
Yeah, and by the way, in case y'all don't know, these are pictures on the right-hand side, back of Linda Gale Walker with her daddy and everybody. And the pictures on the left-hand side, the little girl looking at the thing, is me. And the grandmother is my grandmother with my two nieces. And my grandmother lived to be 102, I believe. So
okay, that is so funny, because my other lady I'm with is my great grandmother. She lived to be 102, and my grandmother, I said, was orphaned. It was her grandmother who ended up having to take her in. And so it's funny to see how those relationships, you still have those fond memories.
We still do, absolutely. So